Welcome to CSIS Online. The way we bring you events is changing, but we'll still present live analysis and award-winning digital media from our Dracopolis Ideas Lab. All on your time, live or on demand. This is CSIS Online.
Welcome, everyone. We are excited for you to join us at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. I'm so glad to have everyone here for this conference. And we have navigated quite well through the pandemic, so it is particularly good for those of us in person to be able to discuss these important issues. I want to thank DAPA in particular for being fantastic partners as we have worked to put on this really important event. The U.S.-Korean alliance continues to thrive, and I am so excited for the next generation of partnership as we work together to bolster our economies and to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific. Our partnership was born in blood, and for decades was laser focused on deterrence and securing the Korean Peninsula. However, I see a space for us to enter a new era of cooperation as we build a partnership on a global stage and jointly, and I mean that jointly, confront challenges across the region while still maintaining a robust deterrence across the Korean Peninsula. I should note on the side that I did my doctoral work, as I was telling Mr. Kang earlier, at the University of Chicago, and half of my PhD class was Korean. They were the smartest half of the PhD class as well, so I have worked very closely both in the policy and in the academic communities and forged strong friendships. Korean and American industry in particular, and more broadly, industrial cooperation have tremendous shared promise. As we struggle through the strained supply chain issues, even in peacetime, we can't help but think about the security implications for the future. Korea and the U.S. have decades of trust that has been built up and forged, and it has governments that have built on common values and principles, including democratic ones. And closer industrial cooperation, as we've seen, has tremendous potential benefits as the U.S. looks to shore up some of these supplies of critical goods. President Biden and Moon laid out a bold agenda for our partnership at their May 2021 summit and articulated a vision for Korea and the U.S. to maintain their shared position as the linchpin for the regional and global order. That means, in part, and I think what's important here, is evolving a defense enterprise that can adapt at a faster pace, bring in commercial innovation. This sets us apart, I think, from previous eras, is the importance of that commercial side, and to draw on the strengths of both nations to respond to threats to the international order. I'm tremendously proud of the work that we have done here in pursuit of that goal as we work together, U.S. and Korea, to ensure that we are equipped for whatever challenges we face. And I just want to thank, we have them on stage, Minister Kang and General Brown in particular. Many of you may not know this, but Minister Kang was a fellow with our Korea chair some years ago, and we're pleased to have him back in the building for his insights on the future of the U.S.-Korean cooperation, so welcome back. General Brown will do a terrific job, and as Cynthia will note, has tremendous experience on the Korean Peninsula, including serving in the U.S. Army. He brings an incredible and vast knowledge base about our bilateral relationship and the broader importance of the Indo-Pacific. So without further ado, I would like to hand the event over to Dr. Cynthia Cook, the Director of the Defense Industrial Group at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. So thanks, and Cynthia, I yield the floor to you.
Seth, thank you for those inspiring remarks, which reminds us of why we're here today, which in part is to celebrate the great partnership between the Republic of Korea and the United States. It is my great honor to introduce our distinguished panel. First, let me introduce the moderator, my colleague, Dr. Victor Cha. Dr. Cha has been at the Center for Strategic and International Studies as a senior advisor and as the inaugural holder of the Korea Chair since 2009. He is also a professor of government and holds the D.S. Song K.F. Chair in the Department of Government and the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University, where he also serves as the Vice Dean for Faculty and Academic Affairs, Graduate Affairs. Dr. Cha spent 3 years in the National Security Council as Director of Asian Affairs and is also a very prolific author, having written 5 books, some of which have won astounding prizes, and numerous articles on international relations and East Asia in leading journals. So we're very, very pleased to have such an expert moderating the panel today. The panel will lead off with short remarks from our 2 panelists. Our first distinguished speaker is General Robert Brown, who is the CEO and President of the Association of the United States Army. General Brown retired in 2019 after serving his country for 38 years as an officer in the United States Army. His final tour was as Commanding General of the U.S. Army Pacific, leading the Army's activities in the Indo-Pacific region, which include the Republic of Korea. He served at least an additional 12 years with various units focused on the Indo-Pacific region, and also deployed to Operation Iraqi Freedom as a brigade commander and as a deputy division commander. His very distinguished career includes numerous recognitions of his service, including the Distinguished Service Medal, the Defense Superior Service Medal, the Legion of Merit, Bronze Star Medal, and a very long list of others, which at his request I have truncated today. Finally, we will have as our second distinguished speaker, Minister Kang Eun-ho, who is the Minister of the Republic of Korea's Defense Acquisition Program Administration, or DAPA. He is responsible for the oversight of DAPA's extensive portfolio of force improvement programs, procurement of military supplies, and defense industry promotion. My colleague Seth Jones recognized Minister Kang's service here at CSIS, and we are so very glad to welcome him back and eagerly await his remarks. Following Minister Kang's remarks, Dr. Cha will moderate a panel. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Cynthia. It's great to be here. I got to say, it's fantastic to have an actual live audience. I know we have virtual as well, so welcome to everybody on virtual, but it's been a while. So, you know, the good news is you don't have to say you're on mute, and let me know that, and we're very, very excited. I want to thank the Center for Strategic and International Studies for hosting this important conference on DAPA, as was mentioned earlier, really key topic, and it's great to be here. And Minister Kang, great to be here with you. I look forward to your remarks and how we can continue to improve. You know, just to start off, sometimes I think we take for granted the history, and was mentioned an alliance formed in blood, and sometimes we sort of forget. I was, right before I retired, I was at a dinner with the Indo-PACOM commander, a Navy admiral. We had the Army commander, myself, the Air Force commander, Marines, Navy, Pac Fleet commander, Coast Guard, and our Republic of Korea military counterparts at this dinner. And we started talking about the history, and we realized of the 12 of us there, 11 out of the 12 our fathers fought in the Korean War. And so think about that, kind of amazing. My father was a Marine in the Korean War. He always said I went astray going in the Army, you know, but when you looked, everybody, all but one, in different services, but just think about that history. And I can tell you that it gave me an immense pride over my 38 years, from the time I was a lieutenant all the way up to 4-star general, being involved in this alliance closely with our ROC military partners that close alliance. It gives me incredible pride, and particularly when you look at that amazing history. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and you see the picture behind me, the lights of the thriving Republic of Korea and the dark of North Korea. You know, do we need to say any more to see what the alliance has done in strengthening and growing the incredible Republic of Korea and how far it's come? And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And this partnership was developed on mutual trust, on shared values of democracy, human rights, common strategic interests. And I think it's really important that, you know, military strength has kept the peace and promoted prosperity among the two nations for 70 plus years. And threats and challenges continue to evolve, though, in the 21st century. And we can't rest on those laurels and say, okay, now times have changed and there are greater threats. So we really need an alliance to seek opportunities for an even deeper engagement, more innovative and greater cooperation across government and industry, as well as the military I mentioned, but government and industry to remain ahead with 21st century challenges. And military will remain key. Security is extremely important, but there must be more. And I think you could safely say without any doubt the Korean Peninsula is more important now than ever in support of security and stability in Northeast Asia. It's a critical part of the world. And you could look and say one of the most successful multinational military alliances in history is the United Nations mission for 70 plus years. If you look at the United Nations Command, you see there are originally 22 nations involved in UN Command. Of course, it was founded by UN Security Council resolutions. It has a role of enforcing the armistice agreement, facilitating diplomacy with North Korea, and an integrator of multinational forces during crisis or conflict. And I think it's important noting a lot of folks say, well, how long? United Nations Command, when does this end? But I think it's very important that at least until we see a unified Korean Peninsula, it's essential that we maintain the United Nations Command and those multinational partners for security, absolutely key. Combined Forces Command, the U.S. and ROC military alliance, is also the glue that holds the alliance together. And absolutely, as I mentioned, I've been proud to have been a part of that. And there are other folks here, General Bernie Champeau, a huge part of that in his commands in Korea and in the Pacific. And I know everyone involved is so proud of that. And it's been an unmistakable combined 600,000 active duty military personnel, roughly about 30,000 U.S. of that, and unmistakable deterrent to potential adversaries of the costs of aggression. And it reflects the mutual commitment of ROC and U.S. to peace and security for sure. Now, to be fair, the military relationship has some clear advantages, right? I mean, obviously, I'm very proud, but there were some advantages. It's a linchpin for stability, but there was the history that I talked about, the tradition, certainly the existing structures that were formed, huge advantage. The funding, the commitment to exercises and to maintaining that, all these are, and it was a fight tonight mentality to prevent conflict, strength to prevent conflict. So certainly some advantages, and again, has deterred outside aggression against the Republic of Korea for 70 plus years. So it's essential we don't let any fissures in the alliance, don't allow any that adversaries can exploit, because they will. If they see a crack, they're going to exploit it, no doubt about it. So peace provided by military strength has been a key to fostering South Korea's miraculous success. General Douglas MacArthur at the end of the Korean War said, and I quote, "It will take at least 100 years for South Korea to recover from the war." I'm sorry to say General MacArthur was wrong, thankfully. And it did not take 100 years. South Korea's economy has increased nearly 400 times since 1960. Think about that, 400 times since 1960. And it's now become the 10th largest economy in the world. Pretty amazing when you think about what South Korea looked like at the end of the war and those vivid pictures. The one on the screen is really prior to the really start of the war, at the end of the war, the destruction, and then where they are, 10th largest economy in the world. The ROC success contributes to mutual prosperity, by the way. This isn't just a Republic of Korea only. Korea is the U.S.'s sixth largest trading partner. So we benefit greatly. And total trade in 2020 is more than $150 billion. We see the emergence of a rapidly growing defense and aerospace industry in South Korea. Some of those leaders are here that are helping with that. And it's grown beyond relying on imports to exporting their defense products, which, because of quality and interoperability with Five Eyes country, is becoming extremely successful. Recent examples exported $7 billion of military equipment in 2021 alone, and expected to top $10 billion in 2022. In Australia and Egypt's recent purchase of South Korean Hanwha Defense, their K-9 self-propelled artillery and K-10 armored ammunition recovery vehicles is just a recent example of that success, and we see that growth. But, as I mentioned before, some very positive things, but we cannot rest on the past 70 years. The world has gotten much more complex and dangerous than it has ever been, and it calls for more innovative cooperation than ever before. Beyond military, maintaining that military strength, but government and the private sector. The world is really, geopolitically is growing smaller and smaller. And South Korea's vital strategic position in Northeast Asia makes it really a nexus of trade, incredible overlapping interests in the region. And when you look at the Indo-Pacific, with 1/5 of the world's economic output coming from the Indo-Pacific region, and 4 of 12 largest economies in the world, and 4 of the 6 largest armies in the world, security threatened first and foremost by North Korea's provocative interests. Again, this cooperation is key. Military, government, private sector, absolutely key. Of course, we all know North Korea's conventional threats, their military, and asymmetric threats that we're seeing nearly daily now with recent launches and even moving into the ballistic missile capabilities, talk of hypersonics and so forth. And then there remains cyber threat, chemical stockpiles. So, some real key issues that remain, no doubt about it. The Republic of Korea's centrality to the broader Indo-Pacific is absolutely critical, more than on the peninsula. The center of gravity really for 21st century geopolitics, as I mentioned earlier, you look at 60% in the Indo-Pacific, 60% of the world economy, more than half the world's people are in the Indo-Pacific. So there are also challenges from China's rules-based international order that they're challenging. That, in fact, kind of ironic as I see it, because China benefited probably the most since World War II from the rules-based international order that enabled the incredible growth in the Indo-Pacific region. Now they want to change it, and their desire for spheres of influence in East and South China Seas, their regional tensions, and risk of escalation. And quite honestly, in my 38 years of having dealt with China, more aggressive now than I've ever witnessed at any other time. It is a cause for concern, because certainly nobody wants conflict with China, but there could be accidental, because of the aggressive nature of what they're doing, accidental conflict for certain. So the United States and the Republic of Korea together must oppose activities that destabilize a free and open Indo-Pacific. That's for sure. We must be together in that. And a commitment to international laws, including freedom of navigation and overflight, is absolutely critical. We used to say, and I said about 1,000 times, Bernie, I should ask you to join me, kapshi kapshi da. We go together. And it was always interesting, we'd say this in exercises, because the U.S. soldiers would say kapshi kapshi da and pronounce it terribly. And then the ROC military would say, we go together, pronounce it perfectly, I would add. But we never quite caught on. But I've since learned from Minister Kang, however, that it's beyond that, and I'll cover that. It's more than we go together. It's also we work together. So as we look at leveraging industry and the unmistakable advantage over adversaries, really the strategic competition, the race for dominance and key emerging technologies is absolutely critical. And it's interesting, it's a huge change. It was mentioned a little bit earlier. It used to be government would lead the way in ideas, and industry would get those ideas. The internet, many things we have, GPS, came from government. Well, that's totally changed, as we all know. The government can't move quick enough. You need industry. You must have industry. And then the government has to then take the ideas from industry, which is changing the whole system, which sometimes in a bureaucratic system is not all that easy, right? There can be challenges because bureaucracies are designed to say no, but it's a big change. And government can't innovate fast enough. We must have defense industry cooperation and counters emerging threats, acquiring cutting-edge technology, enhancing interoperability, really the backbone of allied capability for ROC, U.S., and other allies that's sharing. And it's a driver of continued shared economic prosperity that'll be absolutely key. So if we look at the way ahead beyond military to strengthen, just encouraging U.S. ROC research and development, product development investments jointly, working on that. Interoperability depends on joint investments. You have to, both have to have a stake in the game. And we'll never fight alone. I heard Dr. Hamry told us that last night, and so nobody's going to go at it alone. You'd be crazy. The partnership is where it's at, multinational together, as I mentioned earlier. And so we need common capabilities and best achieved through co-development and adjusting those policies and procedures that enable us to get there. We must win the race for dominance in some of these areas, and you know what they are, but artificial intelligence, key, 5G, 6G capabilities, robotics, biotechnology, and probably one of the most significant I see is big data. The leveraging of data, how the world has changed so much. It's overwhelming amounts of data, and we have to figure that out. So getting industry involved earlier in the process is absolutely key. And then looking at joint capabilities and together, and the technology can be used in operations and how to develop integrated industrial base will help the military, it'll help the government, it'll help us move forward and increase security as a result, and maintain that security. So to enable joint development, we need to continue to review U.S. and Korean export licensing requirements, facilitate easier sharing of data. It's much too hard, I can tell you. I've been right there when I wanted to share data, and there's a person right next to you, and there's ways you can share, and you can't do it. You have policies that prevent you from doing it that make no sense. We've got to break the code on that. We've got to get there. At the same time, we have to protect intellectual property. We got to maintain security, and we all know cyber threats are out there, and cyber's not just a threat of shutting folks down, but a threat that will build too many firewalls, and then we can't ever talk to each other, which is almost as big a threat as a direct cyber attack when you look at it. So we really need to do a better job of coordinating, cooperating, looking at those policies that make sense so we can share information easier. A couple of military, you would expect the military guy to give a few military examples of industry working together that could really help. And I talked to commanders that are there now and some things they need. We have great interoperability, but still lack even human-to-human effective translation capabilities. That'd be a game changer. Industry could definitely help us with that. We know that for sure, but the bureaucracy prevents that. Improving training. I showed you a picture earlier of all you have to do is go to Seoul and you see the incredible growth. It's amazing. And you look at the whole region where there were open spaces before, there's skyscrapers and it's closed. So training has become difficult. If you think about it, you have to train together and you need to use simulations to do that. So we need better simulations. You need to use synthetic training environment, but you also need live fire. You got to go out there and do it for real sometime. It's like Super Bowl's coming up Sunday. It's like the Super Bowl teams never got to practice together. They wouldn't do very well in the game, right? So you've got to practice together. It's not a game, but they've got to practice together to prevent conflict, to have the capabilities. And so we could use a lot of help from industry on how to do that better and be able to, maybe some ways to develop munitions with reduced range, reduced noise, better able to enable live fire training in some of the military. And finally, AI, huge potential in AI with the military needs. I mean, just look at one area I'll talk about is the DMZ and the number of landmines in the DMZ. What if you could use artificial intelligence to cover that area safely and get rid of landmines and dangerous, again, so many areas AI would help, but that's just one. So those are just a few examples. what's possible with deeper industry collaboration. It'll help the military side, but it'll also spill over into industry and that collaboration. The reality is industry is key. Industry's ideas are key, requires flexibility of government policies, and that's why I'm glad we're having this conference to discuss these type of things. And the restrictions, reduce the restrictions and procedures to really unleash the amazing potential of industry so that we can move along 21st century and remain secure for sure. So the goal is taking that U.S. and ROC alliance to the next level, beyond the military, but industry and government working together. The timing is perfect for U.S. and South Korea right now. When we look at administration and working together, again, the summit they had last May, the efforts are like this, and again, thanks to CSIS-DAPA for pulling this together. So, we do have to maintain the close military alliance, of course, but moving to the next level will require that same degree of cooperation between industry as we have seen for 70 plus years between the military. The continued investment and focus on Northeast Asia is paramount. The Korean Peninsula is key, and it's key to ensuring the stability of this vital region, no question about it. So deepening our engagement across government and industry will ensure continued prosperity and security for the next 70 plus years. So I'll close with Kachi Kapshida, which I said 1,000 times, and then for the first time ever, Kachi Il Hapsida. I probably said it totally wrong, but we work together. Thank you, Minister Kang, for that last night. I learned that from him last night, and I agree with it completely. Thank you very much.
Dr. Jones, thank you so much for your warm welcome. Also, I would like to extend my gratitude to Dr. Cook for your wonderful introduction. And my special thanks goes to General Brown for your excellent, inspiring keynote speech. Especially, he has 38 years of military experience behind him, and he came out of it with strong commitment and confidence in our alliance and understanding of the importance of ROK and acknowledgement of the role the alliance played in the success. And also, especially, I'm inspired by his conviction that we should strive for a greater another 70 years forward by not only engaging governments but also industries. Also, I would like to express my gratitude to all those who are in presence, especially even though we are hopefully at the tailing end of the pandemic. Many people couldn't attend this meeting in person, but I would like to ask for your understanding and thank you for your presence. And I'm standing here as the second keynote speaker with a lot of trembling after the awesome presentation by Dr. Brown, because he captured all my best ideas. And I think I can sum up my statement in one sentence. I wholeheartedly agree with the points made by General Brown. I think that could be nicely summed up that way. Notwithstanding, since I have a script that is prepared, I will just go ahead and make some remarks. So don't blame me just because it looks quite similar to what he presented, and just take it as a strong alignment our two nations have when it comes to these critical issues.
We kicked it off yesterday with a private session, and this is our second day of the conference today. Since the inauguration of the Biden administration, The two countries have been actively engaged in exchanges, including the ROC-US summit, and the defense area has not been an exception to such a trend. And that's why this venue for discussing the two countries' future of defense industrial cooperation is so meaningful. After President Biden took office, he sent the message, America is back to the world. Indeed, the U.S. seems to be broaching the world order and the ROC-US cooperation as its new buzzword. The U.S. is devoted to addressing climate change, responding to cyber threats, and enhancing supply chain resilience in collaboration with allies and partners. And particularly through cooperation with allies, it is showing its will to strengthen the influence in the international community and restore the world order. Depending on the Biden administration's foreign policies, conditions for the ROC-US defense cooperation will change as well. The two countries are expected to enjoy more opportunities for cooperation in defense industry and technology sectors as allies, and agendas in the emerging sectors such as supply chain, space, and cybersecurity will have a bearing on the defense industry as well. This conference serves as a great forum in presence of key government officials and industry experts to discuss the future of our defense industry cooperation in this new environment. And I would like to extend my deep gratitude once again to CSIS for organizing this valuable meeting. As General Brown just mentioned, the ROC-US alliance is really succeeding, and it's been one of the most model successful alliance cases. It was born out of the Korean War in the 1950s, and for the 70-plus years since then, despite many political challenges and external factors, it has grown into a mutually beneficial alliance. During the summit between President Moon and President Biden last May, we were reassured of their strong commitment to the alliance, and the two presidents agreed on cooperating by coupling Korea's new Southern policy and the U.S.'s Indo-Pacific initiative. The summit recognized the ROC-US alliance as a critical partnership and presented an upgraded blueprint for the alliance by lifting the revised missile guidelines and reflecting Korea's DPRK policies. Also, now the ROC-US alliance goes beyond security, economic, and regional matters and covers climate change, public health, cooperation on advanced technologies, and is solidly positioning itself as a comprehensive strategic alliance that strengthens cooperation on global issues. Cooperation between the ROC and U.S. defense industries have also grown mature along with the evolution of the alliance. Several years ago, President Henry of CSIS proposed to us a new concept called ROC-US Third Generation Defense Industry Cooperation. So far, the history of the two countries' defense industry cooperation went through the first generation cooperation, where Korea simply purchased U.S. weapon systems through U.S. military assistance, and then the second generation, where Korea purchased U.S. weapon system with technology transfer, or Korean businesses supplied U.S. firms with components and parts through offset trade. Now the third generation partnership was proposed to get the two countries to cooperate from joint development phase to joint production and joint marketing. I personally am in full agreement with that proposal. Over the past 5 years, Korea purchased 10.5 trillion won worth of weapons from the U.S., which is about 78% of our foreign arms purchase, and brought in cutting-edge weapon systems from U.S., such as Global Hawk and F-35. As such, the two countries are actively cooperating in the defense sector quantitatively. However, the third-generation defense cooperation has yet to even take its first step, which pursues collaboration from the development phase. Korea's defense industry capability is taking a leap now, so we need to make a success case in defense industry cooperation that is sustainable and mutually beneficial based on a more mature ROK-US alliance. Also, in line with U.S.'s realignment of its supply chain policy, Korea can consider an option of participating in the U.S. supply chain as an ally in the defense industry. Korea holds excellent technologies in semiconductors, secondary batteries, and IT sectors, and has a number of highly capable up-and-coming defense companies as well. If Korean defense companies can be a part of the U.S. supply chain, the U.S. will enjoy stabilized supply chains through cooperation with Korea, and Korea will foray into the U.S. and global markets. And both countries will enjoy mutually beneficial outcomes thanks to joint development, joint marketing, and cost saving powered by our own strengths. The ROK government is pushing for defense science and technology and nurturing of defense industry with an aim of acquiring advanced weapons system and development capability. First off, we selected 8 technologies such as unmanned autonomous operation, AI, quantum science, and we are increasing investment in them and channeling our defense R&D capacity to them. We are also in the middle of drawing up a comprehensive defense space industrialization plan in preparation of new security environment in the space era. This has a significant overlap with the DoD's 11 modernization priorities. That means if two countries cooperate in the areas of our common interest and focus, such as AI, autonomous vehicle, quantum science, space, etc., we can reap much better results. Under the policy cooperation between the ROK and the U.S., if technical personnel in charge of actual research can get together often to talk and share information, this will lead to joint research cooperation projects of various types. When the number of these projects grows, we will also lead to increase in positive results beneficial to both countries, ultimately enhancing the quality of the bilateral R&D cooperation significantly. On the other hand, the ROK government recognizes that defense industry is a critical sector linked on multiple levels, such as security, advanced science and technology, industry, etc., and implements a number of policies to nurture defense industry and enhance their competitiveness. An excellent example of such endeavor is the recently established Korean Defense Capability Program. We had a separate discussion on this yesterday, but the key is this program aims not only at expanding opportunities for domestic defense firms to take part in defense projects, but also facilitating domestic and foreign defense industry alike to look beyond their competitive relationship and build a more long-term and strategic cooperative relationship. In order to ROK and U.S. defense industry cooperation to have a success story based on these policies, the two countries should enhance mutual understanding on each other's defense industry policies and jointly explore areas of cooperation where we can have a win-win partnership. Honorable Vice President Jones of CSIS, General Brown, and Dr. Cook, and Dr. Cha, and distinguished guests. Korea and the U.S. are like longtime friends with 70-plus-year-old alliance. Just like longtime friends deeply trust each other and do not doubt the trust, the ROK-US alliance has been growing without getting swayed by external factors for a long time. It is like a deep-rooted tree, and us here together, we serve as the root to further solidify the already robust alliance. At every opportunity we have, we need to remind ourselves that our grandfathers and fathers bled and gave their lives and fought together in the war. And we need to say that we sincerely thank all American soldiers who fought for freedom and peace of a country that they once didn't even know where it was on the map. And we need to say that we honor their sacrifice.
이러한 기억과 말이
Our such memories and actions accumulated over 70 years, and that has become the ROC-US alliance as we know it today.
이번 컨퍼런스는
I believe this conference
70년 동안 다져진
is a great
굳건한
and meaningful
한미 동맹
occasion to
관계를
reflect
또
on
한번
this
되짚고
ironclad alliance
미래의
70
발전을
plus
위한
years in the
운명을
making,
삼았습니다.
as well as to discuss its way
다시 한번
forward.
이번
Once again, I would like to
모든
thank all of
분들께
you for
그리고
taking
연설을
part in this
들어주신
great
모든
conference,
분들께
and thank you
감사드립니다.
for your attention.
마지막으로
And for one last time,
사령관님께서 말씀하셨는데요.
as
구호 하나 외치고
General Brown said, I would like to say one motto here.
많은 사람들이
Many
같이
people,
우리 한미동맹
I hope that many people can join us.
방산분야에서 일하는 사람들은 거기다
For many, what I said, go together, but for industry people, we say go together and work together for the industry people. So I'll say go together, and then you say the same thing.
I will say just only go together, but you should shout, work together. Go together. Work together. 고맙습니다.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Minister Kang and General Brown, for really excellent keynote presentations. And first I want to thank the International Security Program, Seth Jones, Cynthia Cook, Greg Sanders for putting on this this conference and the public version of this conference. The partnership between CSIS and DAPA is something that CSIS truly values. And we really do have Minister Kang to thank for that, because not only was he our first visiting fellow from DAPA, the whole concept of a DAPA visiting fellow at CSIS as a way for DAPA and the defense procurement community in South Korea to learn more about the United States, how United States defense industrial production works, cooperation, networking. Dr. Kang was, then he wasn't a minister, he was just Dr. Kang. At that time, Dr. Kang was really the one who kind of came up with the whole concept and was the one who both presented it to CSIS and also presented it back in Seoul. And I remember watching him giving these presentations and thinking, and I said this to folks here at CSIS, he really gets it. He really understands what it means to cooperate with think tanks in the United States and in Washington, D.C. like CSIS. So we really have you to thank for our being here, our being able to be here all together. Both General Brown and Minister Kang started off with a wonderful overview of the U.S. ROC Alliance, and I cannot resist but provide my own as we get into our discussion. And I think, so as some of you know, I study alliances. It's what I do as a professor. And when we look at defense industrial cooperation between the United States and South Korea, it really is a great way for anybody to learn about this alliance and how it has changed and evolved over time. So for example, as Minister Kang said, when we think about the cooperation, it started off in a very one-dimensional, unidirectional fashion, which was the United States providing military equipment to South Korea, the United States selling military equipment to South Korea, and it was really pretty much a one-way street. And it was a very asymmetrical alliance, what we call a patron-client relationship in many ways. This then evolved, as Minister Kang and General Brown said, to the so-called John Hamre second phase, right, of offsets. And now we're on the brink, on the threshold of talking about this new phase. And in many ways, that totally mirrors the overall evolution of the alliance relationship. Across almost any sector, we see how this relationship started out as a senior partner and a junior partner, and now have become more equal. And in some cases, Korea is ahead. Korea is leading the United States. And I mean, just to give an example, to me, one of the great examples of this was when the United States reopened diplomatic relations with Burma, Myanmar. And we actually held an event at CSIS where we had USAID and the Peace Corps here as they were preparing to think about starting Peace Corps deployments to Myanmar, Burma again. And they signed a cooperation agreement with KOICA in South Korea because Korea, as some of you know, it has the second largest Peace Corps volunteer network in the world, next to the United States. And KOICA had been in Burma for years. So this was now a case where South Korean Peace Corps volunteers were working and training U.S. Peace Corps volunteers as they were going into a new area. And there are many other examples of that. And in many ways, this alliance has gone from an alliance that provided private and exclusive private goods to the two parties, the United States and South Korea. It still does that, as General Brown said, it's mutually beneficial. But it's now evolving into a relationship that provides private goods to each partner, but also public goods to the international community. And on the defense industrial side, of course, we see this in terms of some of South Korea's recent sales to places like Australia, the Philippines, Egypt, and others. But I think it should not go without mentioning that while I think for many of our older generation, we think about this alliance as rooted in a deep history of fighting together and working together. For some of the younger generation out there, when they think of this relationship, they are increasingly thinking about it in terms of culture, and where Korea is a sort of leading edge in terms of pop culture. And they think about it in terms of these new sectors of cooperation between the United States and South Korea that were showcased at the Biden-Moon May 21 summit. Global health, climate change, and supply chains, right? Very important areas. So, so this really is an area. This really is a relationship that has evolved, and defense-industrial cooperation, in many ways, is one of the prime examples of that. So I'd like to so we'll have a little bit of a conversation, and then we'll open it up to the audience, if that's okay. And I'd like to start off very broad, and then sort of narrow down our topics. And so I'd like to start, if I could, with Minister Kang, and ask you at a very broad level what it is about the United States that, from a South Korean perspective, what is it about the United States that you see that makes the United States sort of the ideal defense industrial partner for South Korea?
Whether it's Dr. Hemre, or Dr. Cha, or General Brown, I think we all have common view. As we talk about the third generation, it is a testimony that the alliance has done a lot of good things in enhancing not only democracy but also South Korean economy, which went a long way toward enhancing stability and prosperity in Northeast Asia. Along the way of progress, the defense industry, Korean defense industry, has made a lot of progress in quality and quantity along the way. So as we really have envisioned the third generation defense industry cooperation, which areas do we select, which markets do we want to generate, is not really the main topic. Rather, we really want to focus on joint development, joint production, and joint marketing. And the basic tenet and philosophy behind it is not purely economic, but really deeply rooted in the vision that this alliance needs to develop even further, and the defense industry can play a key role in achieving that. Korea has a certain role that it can play, hopefully, in adding to the great success and achievement that the U.S. industry has already made. In particular, General Brown mentioned something truly significant. This cooperation should not be confined to government, but industry needs to join this cooperative effort. This economic progress that Korea has pulled through in the past and what the corporate sector in Korea has gained along the way need to be tapped into so that it can contribute to the growth and development of the defense industry. I'm sorry to mention some specific names, but I'll just give them to you, like Samsung, that has top-notch technology in communications, and Hanwha and LG that has really top-notch technology in certain defense areas. I just give those examples to you so that we really have some good potential to tap into that area to further drive our joint benefits. And this will benefit our industrial development too. So our mutual strength needs to be combined and used in most effective ways.
Thank you. And I do want to actually spend some time talking about this third generation, but before I do that, I wanted to go to General Brown. And so you've heard what Minister Kang has said in terms of why South Korea thinks the U.S. is an important partner. Could you tell us why you think South Korea is a good industrial defense partner of the United States? And also, you did give a fantastic overview of the Indo-Pacific. What role do you think South Korea plays in the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy?
No, thank you. So I think I go back to, 30 plus years ago, when first working with the ROK Army, and it would be the U.S. here and the ROK Army there. We were working together but separate. And then over the years, it's slowly come together to where now we're intertwined. Even the division, the U.S. division that's in Korea, has a Korean deputy, has soldiers. It's mixed, and so that's much like what's happened also with the defense industry. As you see, it was kind of separate, and U.S. would provide, and now it's getting to the point where, as the minister mentioned, the technology is incredible that the Republic of Korea is capable of. I mean, one only has to go to Seoul. It's the most modern city I've ever been in, and just amazing city. And so you look at those capabilities, and it makes perfect sense based on our long-standing relationship to share more. And we've had to go through, in the United States, we've had to change the system again, where the ideas used to come from government and go to industry. We've had to change that, and all the services, all the military in the United States now have ways and avenues to get ideas from industry faster. It's the only way we can stay ahead in this complex world. And it's happened because if you look, the world used to, as little as 25 years ago, the challenges, the fog of war, if you will, that caused us issues was not enough information. We just didn't get enough. And then soon you started to see where we're at now, where the challenge is too much information and this overwhelming amounts of information, but yet that big data and that information is not easily accessible, etc. So you've got to partner with industry to leverage that and use what the government cannot move fast enough. And so logically, Republic of Korea, with their technology and advancements, and as close as we are, what a tremendous partner to help move forward. As far as their positioning, I already see greater involvement in ROK military off the peninsula. And I think it's very important. As you mentioned, they're involved in many humanitarian assistance operations, involved in many peacekeeping, involved in many ways, helping even had forces that joined us in Iraq and Afghanistan at one point as well. But I see that growing as stability continues to increase on the peninsula, and you can. And I think the greatest fear I would have is someone would say, okay, let's say things are at a very, things calm down and North Korea suddenly has a vision and things are more peaceful, maybe unification of the peninsula. I think it would still be very important to maintain U.S. forces on the peninsula working with ROC military because of the key role across the Indo-Pacific. It's such a key area, as I mentioned, so much trade, so much of the economy, so much that if there were nobody out there that was trying to disrupt it, okay, it wouldn't be a problem. But we all know that's not the case. There are those that want to cause issues, and free and open Indo-Pacific that we've all benefited from, they want to make it more beneficial to a few. And we want it to be beneficial to all. And so that's going to require that cooperation. ROC military is key to that off the peninsula as well.
Great, thank you. I wanted to sort of narrow the focus a little bit, and both of you in your remarks mentioned the importance of cooperation from the private sector. And so I guess for Minister Kang, I wanted to ask you, you by name mentioned some of these private sector companies in defense industry and technology. And I guess the question I have there is, what do you see as being the challenges and the opportunities that these companies face in a U.S. environment, right? When we think about joint research or joint development, what are some of the challenges and opportunities that you see for these companies, as they deal with other U.S. companies, as they try to become grow relationships with the U.S. government?
In principle, between our two nations, we have a long history of our cooperation, and along the way we grew, going through the first and the second generation. Government-to-government cooperation is almost seamless, but as we envision the third generation, as Dr. Cha mentioned, industry input is very important. I wouldn't necessarily define it as a barrier. We spill much ink and we share a lot of insights, which was great yesterday, but this was unprecedented effort. Even as we engage in our dialogue, implementing it is quite another thing, because there seems to be a lot of reservation or maybe a little hesitation. So when it comes to make concrete cooperative results, where we have engagement from government, but also industry, we need to be willing to take certain risks. We may encounter certain unexpected barriers, and we may find some differences in perspectives, and it may be perceived as a little conflict, perceptionally at least, but as we keep trying, whatever barrier we may run into will be there only to be overcome. I have a firm belief for this, because that's how our relationship grew, overcoming all the challenges. And one big testimony is our defense cooperation, as General Brown mentioned. The alliance began with military cooperation, but it grew further, that encompasses culture, economy, and what have you. So I think the same potential is there for our defense cooperation to kick off. So what is really urgent right now is just to do it at this moment. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, General Brown.
Yeah,
Yes.
could I add to some of the, really agree 100% with the minister's comments, but I think what you see, and I've seen it over many years, in bureaucracies, and every government bureaucracy, there's a tendency to avoid risk at all costs, and there is risk in cooperating. Look at cooperation in areas, you open up doors that were closed previously. You can get great advancement, but there is also some risk that things may be compromised. I think the tendency is, unfortunately, to hold all those things close and establish policies that create barriers. And I would liken it to, we're trying to, with data, for example, you're trying to get to where you have a data blanket that exists. And right now, we just have threads that are all in different silos, and they're not woven together as a blanket. But there is risk in that, and there are barriers. So it requires a mindset that there will be, nothing's going to be perfect. There will be compromises and security challenges, but you work through them and get stronger. But it is a mindset change, and sometimes that's very difficult in a bureaucracy. We all know everybody says they want change. They want you to change. They don't want to change, right? So it does require change.
So that's actually a very interesting point, because it leads me to the question that I wanted to ask you, General Brown, to comment on, which is, arguably, like you said, change is difficult, right? Especially for government bureaucracies, change is very difficult. But arguably, one of the variables that is new now, you mentioned in your talk, which is the U.S. focus on resilient supply chains. Right. And so, I guess, could you comment on what Minister Kang said in his speech about their aspiration for Korean defense companies to be a part of those resilient supply chains? Is that something that you see as feasible, a good idea? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think based on the long-term relationship and closeness in the alliance, that is a great idea for stability in the supply chain. However, I can see those individuals that will argue, no, it's all got to be, it has to be U.S. based only for real security, and they will be hesitant to go anywhere beyond U.S. borders. And it's a challenge with a democracy, of course, that policies change and so forth, and so you're trying to work closer together, increase the supply chain security, and in other areas. But those risks are there, as I mentioned, and there'll be those that highlight the risk and say it's not worth it. I believe it's foolish to think you could do it all alone. We mentioned earlier, you don't do anything alone anymore. It's not the way the world is now. You can go fast and go alone, or go far going together. And we'll go much farther together, but there are risks. And I do worry that I've seen it myself, involved in innovation in the military. I was kind of a rebel, if you will, going against a system many times. And when you would go against a system, you might have tremendous success numerous times, but the first time there's a failure, a bunch of folks pop up and say, see, I told you, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, and they try to shut it down. So that's what we have to avoid. And I think communications, working things out, and figuring out these policies and trusting each other, which is very easy with Korea and the United States because of our long-standing relationship, and we can build on that. But I say it's easy, it's not easy because it's changed again.
Yeah.
한 가지 더불어서 여기에 우리
And to that, as General Brown just mentioned, I would like to add a specific situation.
세미나에서 시작하기 전에
Before yesterday's seminar, Dr. Hamlin said that U.S. DoD's defense R&D budget this year is about $112 billion.
엄청난 R&D 예산을 가지고 있습니다.
So that is a big budget, but the U.S. DoD,
엄청난 R&D 예산을 가지고 있다 하더라도
although it has that kind of amount,
다 R&D를 통해서 확보할 수
it cannot execute all that budget for all different areas. So U.S. will focus on the advanced technology that will be a game changer, and it has to risk failure. Maybe one or two cases will come out as success, but it still has to focus on advanced technologies. And R&D has to go, but then that's not going to be enough probably. But in reality, we have to maintain the industries and follow the rules.
최첨단은 아니래도
And maybe in some portions, we have to maintain our R&D in certain areas. But Korea has a very strong hold in that. We're not yet there to be focused on the advanced technologies, and our budget's not enough to just solely focus on that. But some of the areas that U.S. is interested and U.S. will continuously need, Korea can fill the gap through our R&D, and I think we need cooperation and collaboration on that so that we can respond to the threats from the adversaries and we don't understand our common need and interest. And also, General Brown just mentioned that some of the Korean companies already have advanced technologies that U.S. companies don't have. So these new technologies, rather than we focus on that, but rather U.S. will fund that, and then Korea can provide that technologies that we already have, and we can jointly manufacture and market. Then that will be definitely a win-win situation for both countries. And we have to go beyond economic and industrial cooperation, but this ROC-US alliance will enjoy more firm success by we expand into different areas of cooperation.
So I think that you're both making a point that deserves to be underscored, which is that from a U.S. perspective, and if we look at the Biden administration and their strategy in Asia, it is very much along the lines of, first the administration wanted to reinstill confidence in our allies in Asia that the United States was back, right, after 4 years. But it was back dealing with a big challenge in a rising power, but one in which the United States might lead, but it really wanted allies to be an integral part of it. And that, that's a big change, right, from the way the United States was a preeminent power at the end of World War II through the Cold War. It is a very different environment now, and one that's much more conducive to the type of things that we're talking about. If I could, Minister Kang, actually get a little bit more specific now, and when we talk about some of these things in terms of third-generation cooperation, in General Brown's speech, he mentioned two things, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And one of them was the whole question of interoperability with U.S. technology, and then the other was protection of information. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that as we talk about sort of the next third-generation cooperation.
For interoperability, this third-generation partnership, joint research and development will be very important. Of course, so far, the source of Korean technologies is from the U.S., and especially in the defense and military technologies are a very good example through our second and first generation, through trade and our cooperation with the U.S. So many of our defense industries and our government agencies were able to grow. And I don't think there's a huge problem in terms of interoperability because of those background. And when we develop and research the new technologies, if we can do joint research together, then there won't be any problems regarding interoperability going forward. But if we independently do our own research, develop our weapon system and operate them, the ROC-US alliance and our combined exercise and operations will have to come up yet another time to invest in interoperability. So given that we need to have that in mind, that we need to work together in terms of joint development, joint R&D, joint production. And there are many technologies that are very advanced in the civil sector, and if militaries can use that, that will help with the interoperability aspect of the problem.
지금 제가 계속 이렇게 말씀드리는 것 중에 하나 안타깝게 생각하는 것은
The thing that I'm pretty concerned about is that also, which was also mentioned during yesterday's session, is that the U.S.
투자하기에는 그런 개발을 하는 데에는
thinks
그렇게 효과성이 없다.
that it's not so effective in investing in those technologies.
라고라고 하는
We talked about 2.75 logger, which is a low-level technology, but depending on the situation, it can be a very effective missile.
하자고 시작을 했어요.
We started out as a joint production goal, but the U.S. withdrew and the ROC continued on with that.
이런 무기 체계도 같이 만약에 공동
But if we can work on these weapon systems together, that will be very effective if we have stuck together. And then we are talking about large armored vehicles and other weapon systems. We can think about that.
지금 계속 논의하고
And when we do the research and development in Korea,
중소업체라든지
we can consider the options of using U.S. SMEs, and if they can participate in Korea's R&D, Korea will have a bigger market, and U.S. will tap into Korea's technology. And that source technologies will provide more effective strategy for the United States. And if we can develop further, then it'll open up more opportunities for us to work together in the future as well, and we can respond to threats better together in the future.
If I could I ask you about, before we open to the floor, just two other things that I took note of in General Brown's remarks. I'd love to get your comments on it. Again, in terms of avenues for getting to third generation cooperation, and one of them is the challenge of cyber security, and then the other is export licensing agreements.
그 양국이 공동 연구할 때뿐만 아니라
Not just joint research between the two countries, but
기술 개발하면서 주제 중에 하나가
the biggest topic between the two countries is cybersecurity in terms of our research.
자연스럽게
Thankfully,
많은 권고 협조를 통해서
thanks to the recommendations from the U.S.,
2014년도에
in 2014,
기술을 보호하기 위한 법도
Korea passed a bill to protect the technology security.
체계가 이미
So we have some sort of footing to protect our security of technology, and especially when we're doing the combined operations exercise,
활용을 하고
we can tap into each other's technologies, and we can operate together without worrying too much about security right now, although that's a big issue.
그러는 미측에서
Right now,
리스크 매니지먼트 프레임워크라고 하는
U.S. has a risk management framework and has experienced many developments in it. And Korea is also trying to respond to that through some joint task force team type of thing.
사이버 분야, 사이버 보안
In terms of cyber and cybersecurity sector,
과제고
it is one of our biggest issues as well.
특별한 협조 과정을 통해
And I hope that there will be a huge collaboration between the two countries to see bigger advances in the sector.
And export licensing agreement?
수출과 관련해서
Regarding export
이
licensing,
질문의 취지가 그
I
어떤
think
내용을 담고 있는지 잘 모르지만 제가 그냥 일반적으로 답변을 드리겠습니다.
I think I know what it generally asks for. So DAPA has been doing a lot of export and an increase, and then so maybe you're worried about our reckless export, but I think rest assured that's not going to happen. When we export our technologies and weapons, we do not ever not miss out and leave out security-related aspect. When we export our technologies, all the government agencies talk about it and discuss. And under our own system, that was also set up by the recommendations of the U.S. side. And we think about whether this export will either undermine the world peace and security, and also if this valuable technology
좋지 않은 분야로 넘어갈 수 있는지.
whether it has possibility of being abused by the adversaries and bad actors,
등을 깊이 있게
and if there is any bad factors for our national security. We consider all this before we decide on export.
그러한 필요한
And when we
조치를
do the actual
상대방에게
export,
요구하고
we require necessary measures on the other side, and we have all the necessary tools and devices in place.
Great. Thank you. General Brown, did you have anything you want to comment on what
Well,
the minister said?
Well, I agree with all. Just to reinforce that, there'll never be enough research and development money. And what limited amounts there are, I think our only chance at really advancing together is through the Generation 3 level effort. I've learned recently, I didn't pay that much attention to this when I was serving, but I've learned recently it's very difficult for industry. Used to spend a lot more on research and development, and their amounts have come down a lot. And we have no hope at true interoperability without sharing in that research and development together. There'll always be, interoperability has different aspects. On the one hand, the equipment will never be perfect. Even if it's developed jointly, there'll always be issues with the equipment, but you can work through it. You stand a greater chance at interoperability when you do R&D together and you get involved early together. The human-to-human aspect of interoperability is a huge strength in Iraq-US, obviously, and that can continue to grow. So I think and cyber is a great example, where we should be doing more together. But again, there are risks in doing that, and there are those who will say it's too much of a risk and want to keep it close hold, but you'll gain much more working together.
Great, thank you. Okay, the wonderful discussion. I'd like to open the floor now for any questions or comments people might have. I'm told that there is a mic that's set up over on this side, so you can just come up to the mic or you can just shout from your chair. But we prefer the mic, I think. So.
We answered all the questions.
Yes, please. I think if you go to the mic so that the recording can hear you.
Thank you so much. So good afternoon, and again, thank you for your wonderful and insightful comments. One question I had for the general was the question about the training and the cooperation efforts as we need to continue. Based on your overwhelming experience, what are some positives that you have seen that would be a good use case for the continued cooperation between Iraq and the U.S., whether it may be to NATO or specific sharing of information to the combatant commands?
No, thanks. Great question. There are a lot of examples of individually countries developing some of these, but the ability to train and share together better. But I think what we're starting to see is, for example, we have an effort in the United States. It's called the synthetic training environment that we're working in, and it goes from where you used to have a big structure, bring people in to a replicated environment, to where they actually wear, like in goggles, they wear it, and it's portable, and they can use it. And really started by Secretary Mattis when he was Secretary of Defense, in that you could go through with a soldier, for example, hundreds of experiences and examples. Well, that would be before actually having to do anything for real. You could be in a jungle scenario, a desert scenario. That's the type of example that would be very valuable if we could get the synthetic training environment jointly working with Iraq military, where you could have great participation and really be able to do what you need to do short of the live fire and train at the level you need, that level of expertise, very, very complicated, where you could do a lot more. We don't want to develop it just U.S. It should be exportable to allies, and involvement early would have been a great thing. It still can happen, but it's a little more difficult because it didn't start from the beginning. But that would be an example of the type of technology that could help. But there are others out there, and I think the key would be early. What is needed, the input from ROC military and U.S. military to industry, and industry helping develop. There are solutions out there like that synthetic training environment. Majority, all those solutions came from industry, not government efforts, and the technology from industry. And there are things that are being used in the gaming world, for example, that are very useful in other technologies to help with training, et cetera. So that if we could get folks together and work that, it would be an even better product and benefit all and help maintain a safe and secure region, which of course leads to greater prosperity and what we all want, free and open Indo-Pacific.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Other questions?
General Brown, Minister Kang, thank you so much for this invigorating discussion. I'm a senior fellow here at CSIS in the Strategic Technologies Program, and also my day job as a telecom security, communication security attorney. It's one of the things we talked about yesterday, and this may be my own myopic focus on the communications sector, but it really does strike me that at the heart of this third generation partnership is the communications infrastructure that undergirds not just the commercial sector, but future warfighting efforts. Outside the cyber realm, which is one part of that, even in the physical battlefield, future warfighters will be operating in a 5G and then later in a 6G environment. So I'd just love to hear given the incredible depth of the collaboration in the commercial communications sector, talked a lot about Samsung here, one of the major players in the world, between the U.S. And its allies, especially Korea, in 5G and later 6G technologies. What lessons can we learn from that commercial collaboration that can be applied to deepen the defense alliance?
I think it was May last year when the two presidents had a summit in D.C. The biggest takeaway and achievement, I believe, was, even though many people talk about lifting the revised missile guidance, which was a solid achievement based upon our ironclad trust and alliance. However, there was another big achievement, which was that the two leaders agreed to cooperate on 5G. In the warfare environment, communication plays and will play an even greater important role, and it will go into an even different dimension as amount and quality of data can be exchanged if that becomes a reality, and it is confined to a certain unit, military unit. However, things develop so rapidly, so much that all different soldiers can exchange data in a real-time basis and can be implemented whether it is in the air or on the land or in sea. Furthermore, if we add robotics, that is so deeply down-to-earth implemented that even soldiers can use it, and it becomes an integral part of the warfare environment. And this is possible only through the solid application of communication. And the warfare capability will be so different and high and far beyond and above the current level. So the game changer will be communication. So related to that, going toward 5G and 6G is a must. As discussed properly, Samsung and other commercial entities, they have top-notch technology in certain areas in the domain of communication. But China and other worrisome entities are making rapid progress and pouring lots of money. They have some serious possibility of advancing and even overcoming some of our speed. And if we have current offerings that you can tap into right now, I think the U.S. has every reason to tap into that to be better prepared for the future warfare scenario.
I'll add to that, first using an example going back to when I was much younger. I had hair and it wasn't gray. When I was fortunate enough to come in, the first kind of unit, the most digitally capable unit in the United States Army was Stryker Brigade way back in 2002. And for the first time ever, we had a network where I could talk to all 5,000 and see 310 Stryker vehicles wherever they were. And I had a problem in combat that no one had ever had before. I would have something happen in combat, and I would have too many people respond. A fantastic thing. In the past, something would happen and people would be isolated for hours, just waiting, nobody knowing what's happening. Well, because we could see, we had a network, we could see the vehicles, we could see where the enemy was going to populate. We actually, I would have to say, you go do something else, you would have too many people respond, which is a very good thing. So that network, the network is critical. Working together would be a key to that network, because as we talked earlier, you're not going to do anything alone. And the challenge we have now, we have literally hundreds of thousands of networks that can't talk to each other. Even within a service like the Army, there are certain areas, data can't be shared rapidly between an aircraft and the ground, say a helicopter in the ground in some cases. Can't be shared, let alone between the services, where you have to share between Navy, Marines, Air Force, Army, cyber, space. You have to share that information rapidly. So the network is critical. There'll never be a network that's absolutely 100% perfect and foolproof. But the best chance at a network that will help enable great multinational cooperation and rapid and fast decisions, the speed of decisions will require that network to make decisions faster than your adversary will be key. Best chance at that is working together. However, there are those walls of the policy and lack of sharing that cause an issue. But if we could work together on that, it's our greatest chance at a network that truly will do what we need. I have a little bit of concern that in some cases the United States will go so fast and have a network where none of our allies and partners can join it. And that's not effective either, so we have to always keep that in mind.
Great, thank you. I think we have one more question, so please,
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, Dr. Cha. My question goes to Dr. Brown. As you served as the commanding general of the U.S. Army Pacific, I would like to pay my tribute to your successful and excellent leadership. And in that regard, I would like to ask you one question. As you are well aware, Indo-Pacific area is such that it plays a significant role in many different regards. And we kept talking about the third generation defense cooperation. When we zoom in on that area, what is the area you see where our two nations can make inroads between our two defense industries? Which nations come on top in terms of the candidates? If you can maybe recall your experience and even current capacity as the leader of the Association of U.S. Army. What are those nations where we will be most advanced in terms of the possible success in gaining inroads into those areas, rather the nations? Thank you.
Thank you. Just as we had planned, we worked together, and so you can pick up your check for those comments on my leadership afterwards. Just kidding. But it was my honor to work together while serving in the Pacific. Great question. One of the advantages for a free and open Pacific are the relationships. We don't have a NATO-like structure in the Pacific. It's a very effective. We know what NATO does in Europe and so key. Unfortunately, we don't have that. However, for the U.S., we have 5 of our 7 allies, partners are in the Indo-Pacific region with Japan, Korea, Philippines, Thailand, and Australia. And you look at, very, very important allies working together. And the more we can do together, and we see that, fortunately, on the peninsula, every exercise you will see at least 15 nations there working together, sometimes up to 20 plus. So that's a key advantage. Partners as well. There may not be allies, but partners that are out there are and it's a huge advantage, because when you look, some of those folks that would do our nations harm, North Korea, for example, they don't have allies and partners. You could maybe China in some ways, okay, you could argue. China doesn't have great allies and partners. We have, so those allies and partners are a key to strength. And of those, one area I think is critical for maintaining the security on the Korean Peninsula and growth beyond is the partnership. Japan needs to strengthen with Japan, Korea, U.S., Australia, India, and I could name several others, but those are really key. And I know there are historic challenges and some of the history, I understand that, but I take great confidence in when tensions were very high in 2017, and Kim Jong-un was really acting up, and I think we came as close to conflict as we have in my lifetime. And Japan and Korea, U.S. were working so closely together to prevent that. It gave me great confidence, and we can work through those historical challenges. But it is about allies and partners working together is a strength, and we must build on that. It gets to, again, with the industry involved and partnering, that is a key to success. So thanks for that question, and appreciate it. Again, honored to work with you, serve with you.
Thank you. So this concludes the panel. If you show your appreciation to our two speakers, that would be great. And I'll turn it back to Cynthia to close us out.
Thank you, Dr. Cha, Minister Kang, and General Brown. I really appreciate this wonderful discussion, a really inspiring vision of close collaboration. I think, from my perspective, next time we should talk about specific steps on how we strengthen the industrial collaboration between the two nations. Good. And how we move forward into some as yet to be defined fourth generation of partnership where we don't even have to think about it anymore. It's all solved. So thank you all for your participation today. Please join us for a short coffee break out in the lobby, and then those who are able to stay for lunch can reconvene in here. Thank you very much.